Good morning, everyone. Good morning. It's good to be here with you this morning. And I always invite you to just be aware of the intention that brings you here. Just be aware of what your heart is desiring right now. Be open to that. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born and a time to die. And it goes on to talk about other things in our life. That, of course, is from the Hebrew Bible, from the book of Ecclesiastes. And it's been popularized by a wonderful folk song, I guess you call it, Turn, Turn, Turn. Remember that? There's a time and a season for everything under the sun. Time for the leaves to blossom and a time for the leaves to die and fall off the tree. Time for rain, a time for snow. A time and a season. When we hear about birth and death, a time to be born, a time to die, we typically think of physical birth, physical death. Yet, every moment there's a birth and death in our life because everything in our life is changing. Every transition, every breath, every thought is born as a life cycle, and it dies. Just noticing that is a very powerful meditation, to be aware of whatever it is you're aware of. Just notice it coming into being. Where does a thought come from? Where does a sensation come from? Where does a desire come from? Where does it go when it leaves? When we hear the sound of the bell, where does that sound come from? It comes from the silence and returns to the silence. And yet it's got a life cycle of its own. And so that's what makes music beautiful. It's what makes life beautiful, is the flow, the timing. The space between the notes are as important as the notes themselves. The space between breaths and between thoughts, between activities, are every bit as important as the activity itself. So our life is full of transitions, and every beginning is a birth, every ending is a death. Human beings, physically, are part of nature. And just like the rest of nature, we're born and we die, and we have a life cycle, whether it's 2 years or 20 years or 90 years or whatever it is. All human beings have a birth and a death, and lots of births and deaths in between those two, of various types. Birth and death exist in all dimensions of nature, from the quantum particle that is born and dies in a less than a nanosecond, I guess there's a tetrasecond or something, even tinier. That's the length of time between the time when the light turns red and the person behind you is hitting the horn. That's a tetrasecond. That's the smallest unit of time, I would say. But everything from quantum particles to galaxies are born and die. Everything from quarks to quasars to quails. Everything that's part of nature, everything that's alive, was born and will die. The universe itself had a birth, and it will die in its form. But it's kind of like the leaves on the trees dying. The tree itself is not dying, just the leaves. And so the tree may look like it's dead, but it's not, because we know in spring, under the right conditions, the leaves will be reborn. And so it is with nature, so it is with each of us. We are like leaves on the tree. You know, we have deaths, we have rebirths, but life itself is not born and does not die. Life is. The forms of life come and go. The activities of life come and go. And we are part of all of that. Birth and death are the common denominator for all human beings, from princes to paupers, from beggars to kings. We're all born, we all die. We're all born pretty much the same way, and we'll all die pretty much the same way. That's the great equalizer. No matter how important someone may think they are, or we think they are, they were born naked, crying, and will all die in one way or another. Those who lived in tribal cultures, and even those that lived in agrarian cultures, were much more aware of the rhythms and the cycles of nature than we are. They needed to be, because their survival depended upon knowing exactly when the temperatures would drop, when the salmon would start coming upstream, when the elk would start migrating, et cetera, et cetera. So their attunement to nature was part of their very being. And we moderns have very much lost that. We've lost our connection with nature, with our bodies. Rather than seeing our life as part of nature, we tend to see our life as part of a big machine, an economic machine. The universe is typically, the Newtonian view of the universe is that of a big machine. That was basically the idea originally back in the days of Newton and Galileo, is the universe is a big machine that God operates. So if we can figure out how this machine works. We tend to see our bodies as machines. I remember in high school taking biology, and the title of the textbook was Your Body, the Beautiful Machine. And seeing the body as a machine, we treat it like a machine. You know, parts break down, you just replace them, get them fixed so you can get up and get on. The purpose of a machine is to function, to do something, to be productive, right? And if the machine's not being productive, it's of no use, right? What good is it if it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing? How often do we feel that way about ourselves? When we're not productive, quote, when we're not functional. in the eyes of the world. We feel like there's something broken because we're not part of the machinery of producing, consuming, doing, going. We believe that's what life is this constant turning of the gears rather than the natural process of nature, birth and death and changes. We've become much more attuned to the clock and to the calendar than we are to the processes of nature. We've been taught, we've been conditioned from a very early age that you don't do what you feel like doing, but you do what the clock tells you to do, or the calendar tells you to do. You know, remember when you were a kid, it's time to go to bed. Well, I'm not tired. I don't care, it's time to go to bed because you've got to get up in the morning. So the morning comes, I don't want to get up, I'm tired. Get up. So we learn to go to bed when we're not tired and get up when we are tired. And you got to eat breakfast. So I'm not hungry. Eat breakfast because you're not going to eat again till noon. Right? So the clock says it's 8 o'clock, you have to eat. Then at 10 o'clock in the morning, if you're hungry, as my mother would say, you can't be hungry, it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. I thought I was hungry, but I guess I'm not. So we learn to shut down and not listen to our bodies. And then comes Saturday, and I'd wake up at 6 a.m., ready to go to school. There's no school today. You can sleep in. Oh, okay. So I practice sleeping in. I get pretty good at it till Monday morning, right? Then it's time to get up. And on and on. So we learn to just numb ourselves to the desires of the body. Now, the real tragedy of that is that we numb ourselves to the promptings of the soul as well. Because the promptings of the soul are like the promptings of nature. Very subtle, very alive, and very subtle. We try to think our way, which is much more mechanized. Thinking is more like a machine. In fact, we have machines that think. We don't have machines that listen deeply. We don't have machines that meditate. Machines don't need to meditate. They need to work. And when they break down, you fix them, and when they can't be fixed anymore, scrap metal. Call 1-800-GET-JUNK. We got a piece of machine that's just junk because it's not functioning anymore. And we unconsciously identify with those machines. And when we're not producing, we feel like we're junk. We feel like we're not worthy of being something, somebody. See, we live in a culture that says you've got to earn your worth. You're not inherently good. You have to prove that you're good. And it's almost the other way around, that you're bad until you prove yourself that you're good. You're not worthy in and of yourself, but you've got to do something to prove it. And so we learn to shut down from our inner listening and we focus on our outer listening instead. And we do this at a peril to our own souls. In our culture, we have lived in denial of death. I mean, when I was a kid, I remember being told Grandma went to sleep. She woke up in heaven. Oh, okay, how'd she do that? Well, I don't know. It was never explained. I mean, that sounded pretty good to me. I wouldn't have to get up and go to school then, right? But then I was told that only happens to old people. But then one of my young friends dies. What? That's not supposed to happen. It's very confusing. Yet we get used to this. And ironically, it is birth and death that sometimes are most sacred experiences. If you ask most people, or I don't know if it's most people, but a lot of people, including myself, what were some of the most memorable experiences you've had in your life? And much of the time, if not most of the time, people will say being present at the birth of their child or being present at the death of one of their parents. Even though it's something we fear and don't want to talk about, when we're actually present to it, it's an extraordinarily profound experience, one that we don't forget. I was present at my father's death, and that was one of the greatest gifts of my life, was to be present at his death, because we were not at all close, my father and I saw everything from different points of view. But in his death, I felt closer to him than I ever did in life. He was in residential hospice for several weeks before he died. And I was with him when he breathed his last breath. And as he lay there dying, and I sat with him throughout the evening, throughout the night, I should say, this poem came to me about my father. And so I wrote it. This was back in 1995. Title, As My Father Lay Dying. Gaunt and jaundiced, Dad died of cancer. Gaunt and jaundiced like a yellow scarecrow, supine upon the bed. Who are you? Certainly not my father, who can pick me up and put me on his shoulder, who can carry me in one arm. You are a brother now. As I look deep into your eyes, I see someone I've never seen before. A fellow traveler on the journey. Someone who walks before me into a land I will someday know. Yet now I see you soul to soul, soul brothers, soul friends, about to part. Shall I see you again? Perhaps, but never again as I see you in this moment. So my father's body lay dying, but also the dying was taking place within my own mind of, you're not my father. Because my father's big and strong. He can fix everything. You're this broken creature whom I have to feed and shave and take care of. You're not my father. You're a brother. You're a soul traveler. And once the veil of father-son, that role fell off, then we were able to connect soul to soul. And I was able to be close to him in a way that the roles of father and son somehow never permitted us to be. And I remember my brother and his wife had a baby just about the time Dad was dying, and he came into hospice with the baby about 2 months, 2 weeks to 3 weeks old, and put her in my father's arms. And that was incredibly poignant to see this being who was about to leave in a few days, meeting this being who was just arrived a few weeks earlier. So it's kind of like an airport, taking off and landing, coming and going. Hi, Grandpa. Hi, sweetie. Bye, Grandpa. Bye, sweetie. You say. And so those moments, whether they're minutes or hours or decades, those moments when we can really touch one another beyond the roles that our mechanized life gives to us, are so precious. And so it's very important to honor every form of death, every form of birth in your life. Because if we resist death, we're resisting life itself. If we're afraid of death, then we're afraid of life itself. Because life and death are inseparable. Birth and death are inseparable. In the Dharma, Buddha Dharma, we talk about impermanence. Impermanence is basically says that everything that's born will die, and everything that dies will be reborn. We often think of impermanence primarily as loss, but that's only half of it. The other side of impermanence is birth. Something new is being born. So I'd like to close with this poem by Rumi. There you are. And this was written almost 1,000 years ago. Rumi says, I died as mineral and became a plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was human. Why should I fear? When did I become less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as human, to soar with angels blessed above. Reborn I will with the angels soar, and when I let my angel body go, I shall be more than mortal mind can ever know. So, happy birthday, happy death day. Enjoy every moment in between.